Hello, my name is Xander. Welcome back to Selenium with Python Django. In this tutorial, we take a look at working with Selenium with headless WebDrivers. We saw in the previous tutorial that we could perform tests with Selenium, a web browser window would open and the tests would be performed. So headless testing is simply running your Selenium tests using a headless browser. So it's going to operate as your typical browser would, but without a user interface. Using Selenium headless tests, they work really well with continuous integration workflows. So in this tutorial, we'll go through the steps of building a GitHub repository with GitHub Actions so that we can perform our Selenium tests. So we're going to start this tutorial where we left off in the previous tutorial. So either use the link in the video description or go ahead and access our Very Academy GitHub homepage here. And you can see that there's lots of repositories. We're looking for Selenium Mastery with Django. Inside of here, you're going to find all the different parts of the tutorial series, a little bit of information, and there'll be a breakdown of each task. If you do have any tutorial suggestions, then please leave them in the comments. I'll add them here for future content, and eventually I'll get around to actually implementing them within this tutorial series. So once you've downloaded the code, you'll find that there's a folder, part 1. Inside of here is the starting and final code. So we're going to start here in this tutorial with the final code from part 1. So just go ahead and create a new folder and start your code editor. So let's just check out the code, see if it works. So I'm going to create a new virtual environment in the folder, and then I'll go ahead and activate that. There we go. And now let's just run the test. So I'm thinking this probably won't work. Oh, sorry. We need to pip install the requirements. That'll take a couple of seconds. So I did create some changes. If you coming from the first tutorial, I did make a few changes because you may have had a few problems. I haven't had any comments yet, any problems as of recording, but you may come across some issues. So let's go ahead and now run the test. Okay, so this is just a text problem with the so we needed a hashtag there. So I'll update the repository with that. Looks like there's 2 issues there. Oh, I'll update that repository, so you won't have to do that. So let's just try and run the test again. So you can see we ran 2 tests and we had 2 failures. So the problem is if you try and run it like this, let's remember that we're going to need the WebDriver installed. So here we're utilizing, if you're new to this tutorial series, we're using Google here, so we're going to need to download that. So let's just go ahead and download the Google WebDriver. So just go to downloads. Here I'm using my browser. If you go over to your browser and go down to settings and on the left hand side, just select about Chrome. You can see I'm using version 90 here. So I'm just going to download the version 90 Chrome drivers. I apologize, this is a little bit of a copy of the previous tutorial, but let's just get this set up. And I'm just going to drag that in that folder. Now in the previous tutorial, I gave you instructions, or I suggested ways of adding this to the path so it can be automatically found whenever it's needed, the Windows path. I did mention of an alternative, so I have updated the repository since then, and you can see here what we can do in actual fact is we can just select where the WebDriver is relative to the test page here. So /, being this folder / and then Chrome driver. So that should run the driver, and that's a little bit easier to do than adding it to the path if you don't want to do that. So what you'll notice that there is a problem, site cannot be reached. That is a problem that you might come across. So you saw from the first tutorial, that wasn't a problem utilizing this, but you may have a problem. So what you can do here, I provided you an alternative we can use self live server URL. So that's just going to get the URL. So let's just move that into there. Let's try that on both. So slightly different here. So let me just, we'll do that a bit later. So let's just comment that out. Let's just try and get this one sorted first. So run that again. And this time you can see that we ran one test and everything was okay. Right, so let's just go through the basic steps of setting this up for headless mode, if you like. So what we need to do is let's just bring in, for example, from Selenium. There's a few ways of doing this. I'm going to show you both ways we could do this, for example. So here we're going to, from Selenium WebDriver, Chrome options, import options. So we can move this way. And then what we can do is now define some options. So we, of course, here, I'm just providing the most simplest I can possibly get away with here. So we're not using unit tests or any other kind of framework here. I'm just trying to set up a very kind of naked test here, simplistic test. So we can see that is working okay. So we bring in the options. So typically you may want to set this up for multiple tests, of course. That's what I'm kind of drawing towards. So we're going to set up options, and then we're going to define the options. So all we need to do here is we need to just set the options for headless equals true. Right, so essentially we're just defining the options for Chrome. That's essentially all that we're doing here. And then we can go ahead now and define our driver. And we're just going to then set our Chrome options equals options, which we now know equals headless. So that sets up the headless option. Seems like a long-winded way of doing things, but that's just one way. Right, so now what we've done is we've set our driver up to use headless options. Let's go ahead now and just take this out and put that there. So we know what Chrome driver we want to utilize. So we can get rid of that now. So what's going to happen now, hopefully, is if we run our tests again, the window, the GUI window is not going to appear. The tests are run, and there we go. We're now running in headless mode. I will give you an example utilizing Firefox shortly, but let's now package this up so that we can deploy onto GitHub. So this might be considered an advanced tutorial, so I make the assumption that you already have a GitHub account. If you don't, let's just very quickly build a GitHub account. Once you've done, go over here, select a new repository, say, and let's just make a new repository. So I'm just going to call this Selenium testing. And then it's going to be public. I'm going to create the repository, and then I'll go ahead and upload an existing file. So I can drag some files into here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to select files I don't need here to upload. Everything else we're going to need. So let's just drag that across. Of course, there's many ways we can do this. This is probably the most simplistic way of uploading your files initially to GitHub. Right, so once we've done that, let's commit the changes. So you're just going to need to make sure that everything uploads. So just upload some new files. Just make sure the whole project is available before moving on. So let's go ahead now and create some actions. So we'll utilize the Python application pre-created workflow here. So select this here. You can see it's going to create a new folder in your repository, .github, workflows, and Python app YAML. So let's just commit. Yeah, let's just go ahead and commit that. Okay, so I've opened up the repository here in Visual Studio Code. You can now see I've got the YAML file here. And let's just go ahead and have a look, see what we've got. So we'll get rid of all of this here. We'll set this so that anytime we push to the repository, the actions are going to be performed. So let's build our testing environment. So we're going to select jobs, build. We're going to run this on Ubuntu, the latest version. So now we can just go ahead and, for example, create some steps. So it might be that we want to utilize checkout version 2. And I guess all we need to do here in the basic steps that we need to do here is just install the dependencies. So here what I'm going to do is install dependencies, so pip upgrade pip, and then install the requirements file, assuming that you do have one, and then we're just going to run the tests. So let's go back into our tests here. Now we're not going to have available the Chrome driver, so I've removed that here from line 15. So it's just going to read Chrome options. Yeah, we're just going to give that a go. So let's go back now. I'm just going to push that over to my repository. Okay, so having pushed that across, let's go over to Actions. You can now see that potentially the actions are trying to be performed. It looks like we've got a problem here in line 12. Okay, so just need to move that across, just tab too far across. Okay. Okay, so once we've done that, we can now see that the action is running. So we can follow the action if you've not done before. So the build process will take place. You can see we're installing dependencies now. And then we go ahead and run the tests. Looks like we run the tests okay. And the job is now being completed. So here's the final code for the YAML file and then for the tests here. So notice that we haven't actually needed to specify the Chrome driver. It looks as though that it's already available within the Ubuntu latest here. So that was great. So there's nothing special we need to do there. So take, for example, now we want to change from Chrome. Now we want to use Firefox. So in order for us to do that, we just need to change the options here. So instead of now creating options equals options and using options like this, let's just go ahead and options equals WebDriver, extend from WebDriver, Firefox options. We can then set the headless mode to true, like we've done already. And now we just need to specify our driver to be Firefox. There we go. So there's no other additional changes that we need to make. So let's just push that across and see the actions take place. So once you've pushed across, you can see now the actions we're going to build. So it's just going to go through the same process again, installing dependencies. Then we're going to create our tests. Looks like we've tested okay. And now we've done the post run actions and we've completed the job and everything is okay. So I've gone ahead and just opened up the second test. Now I've made a few changes here. So the path, so you can now see I'm using the live server URL and the additional path here to the login. This option here I'm going to use, in this case, we're going to use Firefox for the first test and then just the WebDriver Chrome for the second test. No other changes I've made here. Just make sure that you've got keys, importing keys on top here. So have a look at the repository code. So let's now go ahead and just push that across and see if this works. So the build was successful. The tests were successful. 2 tests were run in 12 seconds. Okay. And everything is fine. So there we go. It's just a simple example then of using headless Selenium testing with GitHub Actions. So I tried to simplify that as much as possible to try and find this baseline for us to work from. We have now worked with Selenium Headless to set up some headless tests, and then we've applied that utilizing GitHub Actions to create a testing environment on GitHub so that we can test our application each and every time we push new code over. So I do thank you for listening as per normal. Hopefully that was useful for you to get started, and hopefully I'll see you in the next tutorial.